Okay, session four, BOMAQtalk. We are talking creative leadership. If you tuned in to session three, this is a continuation of session three. This is session four, and we are coming into this session with the segment about logic stress testing, talking about AI as a strategic sparring partner, right? And so in this segment, I'm most excited about this because it's the application of AI that almost nobody is talking about. And it might be the most valuable one. So we've been talking about AI as a content producer, first draft generator, a mood board tool. But there's another use entirely, AI as your stress, uh, logic stress tester, logic stress tester, right? So here's the premise. Every creative or strategic decision has a logic chain. Well, at least it should. We are by trade architecture, engineering, technology. So we kind of think through our strategic decisions logically. We like to think so. And so you're recommending this positioning. We talked about the example of positioning. Um, because you believe that it's about the audience, because the market research suggests this, because it creates this differentiation, right? And so that chain can have holes, wrong assumptions, illogical leaps, things that feel true but haven't been tested, right? And so AI, specifically large language models, are extraordinarily good at finding holes in argument structures, right? They have been trained on more arguments, counter arguments, and logical analysis than any single human advisor you could hire. So they'll push back on your logic without politics, without ego, without caring about your feelings, right? And so this may make you deeply uncomfortable or but it's incredibly useful. And we like feedback, we like having advisors, formal advisors, and uh, have at least 30 groups that we are a part of, or on professional groups, entrepreneurial groups, faith-based groups. And of course, with any human group, you're going to have some conflicts, some feedbacks, different perspectives. And more recently, AI groups, right? AI groups that are specific to AI, a specific tool. And so depending on how you use it, it can be incredibly useful, right? All this feedback. And as you kind of compose some of these insights, you can throw it into AI and use it as a sparring partner. So let me show you what it looks like in practice. So um, uh, a stress testing workflow, this kind of thing you can do in a single session before you take a strategy to a client or build out a project specific for your business. So say you developed a brand strategy for a client or for your business, right? And so, like I said, we're working on core five, core six. And so the brand positioning in the market is the only project management tool built for teams. This is the positioning, the only project management tool built for teams that don't um, all work at the same time. I think it's strong. I'm about to present it. Before I do, I open an LLM and I run what I call the red team protocol, right? So the positioning is the only project management tool. This is the only project management tool built for teams that doesn't work, uh, that doesn't do all the work at the same time. Anyway, the first prompt is I'm about to present the following brand positioning to a client. I believe it's strategically sound, which right now I'm having a little problem with. But your, your role is to be my harshest critic, identify every assumption this positioning relies on, every logical weakness, and every scenario in which this positioning fails or becomes irrelevant. Do not be polite, be rigorous, and you this is what you paste into AI. You ask it to do that in regards to that statement and that positioning. AI will come back with possibly maybe 5 challenges. You can outline in 5 different ways in which uh, challenges that you see with this positioning, right? And you can even give it that brand position, a brand foundational document to base that positioning off of, right? So um, it may come back with different uh, challenges, such as one, the word only is a falsified claim. Do you have evidence that no competitor has made this specific claim? It may say, second challenge is teams that don't all work at the same time is a description, not a benefit. What is the emotional or business outcome being built for this scenario? Right. And that's a good one because I was thinking of it right away. Um, Challenge number 3, this positioning becomes irrelevant um, if synchronous work makes a comeback. What's the durability of the argument, right? Challenge number 4, does this speak to the economic buyer or the end user? And are they the same person? Uh, Challenge number 5, what does built for actually mean in terms of features? Can the product so, make this claim, stand on this claim, right? And so you can go back and say, oh, okay, let me at different angles look at some of those challenges to that positioning at different angles and begin to answer some of those questions or reiterate. You can even ask AI based upon the questions that you posed and my answers, give me a better positioning statement, right? Or 3 different versions of positioning statements that speak to this intent, right? And so those are really, good challenges to be able to um, uh, reasons to contemplate scrapping that position, modifying it, or revising it, right? And these are may even be questions that you have to answer in a client presentation if this is for a client. Um, and so it kind of trains you to have some of those answers already uh, ready to answer and to kind of work through them ahead of time, right? Um, and to helps you to reveal any genuine gaps that you may need to address before you present. So um, say um, you can run a second prompt, right? Um, like I kind of indicated before, based on these challenges you've identified, play devil's advocate and construct the strongest possible counter argument a client might make to reject this positioning. Then suggest 2 alternative positioning angles that would address those weaknesses while maintaining strategic differentiation, right? So now I have the original positioning, the strongest case against that positioning, and then 2 alternative directions, all before you spend a single minute in a client room. This presentation is tighter, it's stronger, it's defendable. Any pushback comes, you've already thought it through. And so uh, using AI uh, to synthesize and create these counter arguments. I really love this way of using AI, right? Because I can go back and forth. And so rather having this mediocre, naively creative idea, um, that original idea still came from you, but through this pressure test, you go through this exercise and you're able to refine it and make it better and make it more a more original idea, right? And so for this particular exercise or this workflow, we use Claude and Perplexity in our workflow, right? So we do this exactly. You know, when we started out, we started this way because before even AI was present, our workflow was like that. You know, we would do market research, do kind of stress test it, play it against our advisory board within that industry, listen, do some silent listening, industry uh, research, market research, those types of things. But now, you know, we can use Claude and Perplexity to gather more information and stress tested. Um, uh, and so within our workflow, Cloud and Perplexity does that for us, that sparring partner, and then we use the other AI to build those tools, those AI tools, tools like Lovable and Cursor, and Replit, some of the other ones, right? To build out what with the specific prompts that have been strategically tested, discussed, and crafted. And so the AI tool uh, that builds it only contains prompts that have been stress tested. So we're over here discussing it. We're going, well, what about this? What about that? What would that look like? You know, all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden we come up with the prompt and then we put it in the AI that we're actually building. And so it's not this back and forth. Oh, that's what it looks like. Oh, that's what it looked like. If we have stress tested and we put a prompt in and we're not getting what we want, you know, we come back here and say, okay, what, you know, what was not good. You know, this is the screenshot. This is what this is what the intent was. This is what we got. How do we need to articulate that better so that that AI tool understands what the intent is, right? And so we've been doing that. We do that. Um, so it's just not theory. We've tested it. It works. Um, and so there's a meta level benefit here that's worth naming. When you regularly stress test your thinking with AI before you present it, you get sharper faster because you start anticipating the challenges in advance. You start building the counter arguments into your original work. The AI is training you to think more rigorously, not just improving any single output, right? So take your most recent strategic recommendation, a positioning, a content strategy, a campaign direction within your business or for a client, and run, you know, what we're calling this red team protocol on it before the next client conversation, team meeting. And the prompt is be my harshest critic. Find every assumption, every logical gap, every scenario where this may fail. And uh, and then have it report back, see what the output is. And very interesting conversations that you'll have, but very much uh, uh, a great way to improve your creative ideas, right? And so the so what layer, so what? So what? You know, going from synthesizing information to creating these insights, right? So we talked about that in session one, session two. We're going to add that layer to the stress testing conversation that connects back to something fundamental about creative leadership. The difference between synthesis um, and insight, right? So because AI is extraordinary in synthesizing and parsing through, scraping through information, and coming to a consensus of thought, it can take 50 industry reports. Yeah. On average, we don't go through 50. Usually we will go through five. We'll take a uh, a percentage of all those that are out there and take it, that are specific to a particular industry and come up with a consensus of that. But with AI, it could take 50 industry reports, it can find them, read them, summarize them, and tell you what they say, the common threads, the emerging patterns, the points of consensus and disagreement. Um, but that is not insight, right? It tells you what is happening, but it doesn't tell you so what it means, what it implies, what could you do differently because of it, what does it mean, and the gap between um, uh, it summarizing all the information, parsing through all the information, and insight is where that creative leadership lives. That's what we are suggesting, right? And so, uh, just to give another kind of concrete example of that distinction, um, the 50 reports and producing the summary, say remote, um, the the summary is that you got from AI says that remote and hybrid work models have continued to grow post-pandemic. That's true. Remote and hybrid work models have continued to grow post-pandemic. Distributed teams now represent the majority of knowledge workers in developed economies. Research shows that remote workers report higher individual productivity but lower team cohesion. Those are we would say, hey, yeah, those are believable statements, right? That's excellent, accurate, well organized. Totally generic though. The insight layer, okay, yeah, we all can agree to that. So what? Requires human who knows a specific context. So for a leadership development firm, um, we're a management consulting firm. We don't really poise ourselves as leadership development, even though we work with owners, managers, administrators who are leaders, who we do have development programs for infrastructure and the systems to which owners, managers, and administrators lead. Um, but we're not a coaching consulting firm. And we don't uh, coin ourselves as a leadership development firm. Um, I know that we do those activities, um, uh, but we are more focused on the systems thinking, um, systems theory, and then the systems within the infrastructure, right? So, uh, but for this example, the so what might be. This means that the single most um, So the so what might be, this means the single most valuable leadership capability we can develop in the next 3 years is the ability to create belonging at a distance, not Zoom facilitation skills, right? Not digital tools, belonging, which requires a completely different model of leadership presence. And nobody is training for this yet. That's the white space, right? And so, that's the insight, uh, and that insight is built on this data, plus your experience working with leadership teams, plus your read on what competitors in the space are or aren't doing, plus your intuition about what clients are actually worried about beneath the surface of what they say and they want, right? Um, not None of which AI has. So the workflow is AI does um, the synthesis fast. You add the so what layer, and then, and this is important, you go back to the AI for one more step. You give it your so what and ask it with a K, ask it to stress test the insight. I've concluded X, Y, and Z. Challenge this. What am I assuming? What alternative interpretations of this data will lead to a different conclusion? Who would disagree with me and why? So you're using AI at the front end of the research process and at the big back end of the insight process. The human intelligence lives in the middle. That's the best architecture. I want to, we can kind of, if we want to give it a name, we can kind of give it a name, right? Um, but in any case, pressure tests with AI, finalize as a human. The four-step loop is how you produce content and strategy that is both fast and genuinely valuable, right? So synthesis, insight, pressure. Synthesis, insight, pressure, right? Before you finalize. Okay. So um, let's move into the next part of this segment, which is ethics, taste, and creative integrity, right? Auditing for machine, those hallucinations, and the creative flatness, right? That happens. Lots of folks have talked about it. That was a lot of criticism about AI because of the hallucinations, and then some of the creative missteps and those types of things, which all have to do with some of the prompting. It is user error. In some cases, user error, right? So you can't have an honest conversation about A and creative leadership without talking about the failure modes. It's not perfect. Humans, there's human error, and then yeah, there's going to be tech error. So not to be alarmed, but knowing what to watch for, uh, what's going to separate professionals from amateurs and stuff like that. So some stuff, yeah, we know, one of the uh, images that we put out there, it had the mobile phone, it had the image on the other side. We knew that. We saw that. We were just like, we're just going to leave it because we want the image to show. So even though it's not two-way phones, don't, we don't have two-way phones. They have two screens on both sides. Maybe somebody should invent that. But it's the AI created the image that way, and it was not correct, but we left it there. That was one of the failures of that image, but we left it there because we wanted the image to show, right? And so understanding and knowing what to watch for is, you know, how you can catch some of those things. And so there are two failure modes that we see constantly in AI assisted creative work, right? It's well known. Um, and both of them are subtle to miss if you're not looking for it. The first is machine hallucinations in the creative sense, um, where AI fabricates facts. Um, the creative equivalent, where the AI produces work that is locally current but kind of globally wrong. It sounds good, it's all connected, but it uses the right words, but the logic's off, the tone is, calibrated for a slightly different audience. The emotional register is a half degree too cold or too enthusiastic. Um, it's convincing, but it's not right, right? So um, the easy thing, the danger is that it's easy to approve things that are locally coherent, or the output is quick and it looks right. It looks about right. If um, as you glaze over it. But once you kind of dig deep into it and slow down, you'll see that some things are kind of slightly off. So um, here's a, a audit that you can consider, for consideration, right? So in reviewing AI creative output, you can ask 5 questions, So, um, one, does this sound like something a real human being would actually say? Or does it sound like something someone would write when trying to sound professional? Two, is there a specific concrete image or idea at the center of this? Or is it built on abstract language that sounds meaningful but points to nothing? Three, does this feel like it could only have come from this brand, or could any brand in the category have said it? Four, does this take a genuine position, or does it kind of hedge over several different positions? Five, would I be proud to put my name on this, or am I approving it because it's kind of good enough, right? And so um, the second failure mode, that's for the, some questions you can ask the audit for the hallucinations. But just going through to fact check it against your brand foundation, against all of your written documents, your business plans, those things that you have built, that speak to the correct intent, testing it against that as well uh, would be a surefire audit as well, right? So the second failure mode, creative flatness, um, those generalities, in some ways more uh, worse than hallucinations, right? So AI, this is where AI produces work that passes every quality check, but has no edge, don't have that competitive edge, doesn't have differentiation, none of that. And so it produces this static, you know, probable continuation of input, and it's going to gravitate to average, to the center, the most common way a thing has been done before. And creativity, by definition, requires doing something that hasn't been done before, or at least the thing that feels, fresh within that context, right? So the solution to creative flatness is this deliberate disruption prompting. When you get a flat first draft, don't prompt for revisions, prompt for constraint violations, right? So tell it, rewrite this as if the brand were speaking, at a conference, or rewrite this for an audience of uh, the age of your target market. What would this positioning sound like if a warning label instead of an invitation? Or, these prompts force the AI off the center of the distribution, and then you use these outputs not as finished work, but as raw material, so something, um, in a weird direction often contains a phrase or an angle that cracks you out of the average, or of the median, right? And so um, using AI's range as a creative brainstorming tool rather than a drafting tool, it's one of those, it's another kind of workflow. Weird outputs are often more generative than the competent ones, right? So those are the more fun ones. When you get it off center, you ask it something that's kind of jarring. And it's the same way with our own brain, right? If I want to get my brain to kind of focus and start to think a little bit differently, I'll start using my left hand instead of my right hand. Or they say to turn words upside down and try to read upside down, or start start doing um, uh, something different that makes your brain get out of coast mode and say, hey, what's going on? You're not doing things the same way that we always do. We always write with our right hands. You write with the left hand, or we always read left or right, and now you're reading something different, and so it jogs the brain to get off coast cruise control, and to get in the game with some focus, with some new renewed focus, right? And so this is sort of the same jarring type of disruption, but for AI, right? So um, when working with AI creative production, there's some questions you might want to consider asking consistently. And this is the ethics layer. Is the work honest? Not legally, but creatively? Are you making claims that the brand can actually substantiate? Or is the AI helping you produce aspirational language that sets up a trust gap with the audience, right? And so we talked a lot about how AI is like a continuation of what we were kind of the way we were producing multimedia previously. So there's no really big jarring jump just in terms of media in the way that we are presenting our brands. What has changed is how we articulate it in the detail into which we articulate it, because AI is helping us to clarify those things better. And so we kind of have to ask those questions. We've had to ask those questions. Second, is there a transparent question in some contexts, journalism, thought leadership, some forms of branded content, legitimate questions about disclosure, you know, um, those professional ethic norms, um, approving AI output, and the uh, engagement, um, and those, how those pieces engage with different audiences and what formats they need to be utilized in, right? And so, asking those questions and coming up with those answers. Thirdly, are you maintaining the kind of creative standards that built your reputation? And so that's what's, as we transition, uh, we are very open with about the process, showing folks, in what ways the website is changing, what it looked like previously, what it looks like now, what's changing, so that as we are building, um, uh, folks that engage with us aren't getting lost in the sauce. They're not getting disoriented. That's what even though we are beginning to utilize other tools, we are going um, at a pace that is equivalent to our client base in the way that they're able to adopt that information, so that when we say, oh, go to the website, click on core one, go to core two, core three, it's there. It's not in midstream, even in the new tool, you'll see the same cores, and how they're laid out will be user friendly, right? Um, 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 so that's always a risk, right? Risk with AI is that you are building things faster, but you can't stop exercising that the muscle, the brain muscle, right? So that creative judgment, like any skill, you can't stop using it, right? So core four, legalism when it comes to ethics and aligning reputation management, things like uh, transparency questions. Core four, legalism. That's our AI creative manifesto when it comes to deep dive into these three ethic questions and the frameworks that we adapt around what our AI policy will be for the firm, for projects, for teams that engage with us, right? And so, um, because AI, as we integrate it, it's a new effort. Those policies will be evolving and coming into fruition and changing along the way, right? So, Um, Core four, legalism, it's there. We utilize it. And as we move into AI, that's where those policies will still be housed. So you can take a look at that. It's on our website now. And even as we integrate and evolve into AI, it will continue to be in that core, right? So um, let's talk about curation as authority, right? We talked about this a little bit previously in the creative leaders as curators, and you know what that means about them, whether or not you are someone that produces, right? The more experience you have, I'm of the school of thought, Frank Lloyd Wright school of thought, where top down, bottom up. If you are um, managing top down, um, bottom up is where all the work happens, and the feedback in the trenches is very valuable information in knowing the workflows, bottom up workflows, is imperative to making top down decisions. So, um, uh, for most of history, like we said in the first segments, creative work, the authority came from making things. You had credibility because you could produce. You've done the craft. You built the thing. Your track record was your portfolio of output. Um, but when anyone can produce output now quickly, the signal value of production drops, right? Because uh, what goes up in value is the judgment to know what's worth making. You have a portfolio full of stuff that's like, okay, yeah, we saw this in the last five firms, the last five businesses have the same thing, right? So the discernment to say 20 directions we could go, but this one is the way to go. The willingness to take responsibility for the filter. And here's the content strategy implication, because I think, this is something um, it's worth saying again, right? So we haven't really fully internalized that yet, but what this means. We're BOMAC talking about it because it's in the moment, right? And so some of it we're going to eat the meat and leave the bones. Some of it we're going to take in even on ourselves, where it applies, where it's applicable. And then, some of it we're like, okay, yeah, that sounded good, but it really doesn't work. And this is, and that happens sometimes. Um, Even within the 10 core consulting services and some of the managed services, when we get into clients and different administrators, each are different and they're dynamic in their structures, their problems, their and the solutions that they need. And so it has to be adapted to that. That one size fits all, even though we have a framework, that framework has to transform to be applicable solution to the unique problems of each client, right? So um, think about the creative directors and thought leaders you actually follow. The ones whose content you genuinely wait for, none of them are posting 3 times a day. They're posting when they have something worth saying. And that's why we say if we if we we'll have BOMAQ talk as long as we have something to BOMAQ talk about. If we don't have BOMAQ talk about, we'll be like, okay, we're gonna go on break because we're not talking just to be talking. We do have some things that we want to talk through. Um, and I do like I said this before, I do like to hear myself talk because I do listen to myself. And so when I listen to myself, I want to say, oh, you know what? It's that eat the meat, leave the bones moment where we say, okay, yeah, we will adopt that. We may not adopt, some of these things, right? And so we're BOMAC talking it out and strategically working it through. Um, and so Same with the folks that we follow. Um, we are taking in insights from some of the groups that we are in, some of the folks, the networks that we are connected to. And when they post, we may pay attention because we know their filter is working. Everything that got posted passed some kind of high bar of experience that they're working through. So um, that give the gain, that give the gain that we're talking about applies perfectly here because you get by doing the curation work, having synthesize, being the filter, making the judgment calls. So your audience doesn't have to. You gain authority by being the person they trust to tell them what to pay attention to and what to ignore. Um, Secondly, telling people what to ignore is the one most creative leaders. It's the one thing most creative leaders shy away from, right? So because it requires taking a position, I got to take a position. That's have to say yay or nay. And the you know the this trend is overhyped. This tool is not ready for professional use. This approach worked for somebody else, but it will not work for you. Those are defensible claims. Those are kind of, yeah. But it's also a vulnerable position to be in, right? So the willingness to be wrong publicly. But we're saying, hey, consider it. We think it actually builds trust. So the difference between that know it all, we don't plan to be like we know it all. We do not know it all. And AI definitely knows way more than we can tell you. You can take the script of all this or whatever, put it in AI, and it can throw another spin on it. And what we are hoping, the value we are hoping to bring is to know what matters. Old authority was about breadth, the person who knew the most, had done the most, had the longest portfolio. New authority is about discernment, the person who can look at everything available, all this knowledge that's available, and confidently say, you know what, here's what matters in this situation, here's what doesn't, here's what we ought to consider, and then be enough creative leader to test it out, change position, and speak up when you're wrong. Say, hey, you know what? We got that wrong. We're gonna have to switch it up. Those types of things, right? So that's the creative leader of the next decade that we would, like to evolve it to be. Yes. Um, we we think that's also the progressive leader. We talked about the progressive leader, the mindful manager. This is right along with that discussion as we move into AI integration, right? So AI actually makes this more possible because when AI handles the synthesis, the reading, the research, the first draft, your time is freed to do the only thing you can do, your genius, work on that service, that product, deciding what matters, developing the point of view, holding the standard, protecting the soul of the firm and the vision, the mission, those types of things. And that falls right along with our mission and our vision. See how it all works together? See how it all works together? We wouldn't care about that if that wasn't our mission and our vision. Like, oh, hey, do what you want, right? So, in closing, all right. So yeah, we're wrapping it up. We're wrapping it up. We've covered a lot of ground. Ah, yeah. So let me give you a compressed version of everything we've discussed today, and then I'll suggest 3 other action items for you to consider this week, right along with what we're talking about, right? So AI is not taking the creative job. It's changing what the creative job is. The leaders who adapt aren't the ones who resist the tools or the ones they are the ones who outsource everything to them. They're the ones who become architects, creative architects who understand that their value now lives in the design decisions, the constraints, the taste, the judgment, and the curation. The framework in 5 parts. Become the editor in chief. Your value is in the judgment calls, not the first drafts. 2, brief architecturally. Use the 6 component architectural constraints brief to install the blueprint before AI starts building. 3, build the brand foundation. Externalize everything you know about the brand's voice, soul, and forbidden zones into a living document. 4, stress test before you present. Run the red team protocol on your strategy before it enters a client room. 5, be the so what. Let AI do the synthesis. You provide the insight, the layer of interpretation, implication, and guidance that no model can replicate, right? And so consider these 3 things to do this week. We've talked about a lot. You won't be able to do all of that. Um, oh, maybe you will be with AI. With AI, I was going to say you won't be able to get all that done this week, but you might be able to do it with AI. So consider these 3 things to do this week. Number 1, run the content audit on your current workflow. Write out every step. Categorize each one as architectural requires your judgment and taste, processional, repeatable, structured, or AI assistable. That map will tell you exactly where to focus your attention. Number 2, draft the brand foundation document for your most important client or your own brand. You don't need to complete it in one sitting. Start with the voice DNA and the forbidden zones. Those 2 sections alone will change how you and your team brief any work going forward. Number 3, run the red team protocol on something, taking a strategy, a positioning, a content angle that you're planning to present in the next 2 weeks. Paste it into an LLM with the prompt. Be my harshest critic. Find every assumption, every logical gap, every scenario where this fails, then strengthen your presentation with what you've learned, right? Um, and if you want the deeper dive on any of this, we have another set of sessions for you next Friday. It will be National Small Business Week starting next Friday. Um, and the session will be a prompt to product session, a session where we go hands-on with specific workflows for turning AI outputs into high-value client deliverables for our business, as well as service and products for clients, right? So real screen shares, real prompts, real results. So tune into these upcoming sessions. You can get those on YouTube. Just search for Urbanetectonics. That's Urbanetectonics, right? And so um, uh, our 10 core version of the AI Creative Manifesto, right, is also on our website. You can take a look at that. All of these little elements to which we are discussing are are part of the 10 core makeup, right? And you can view those at the website www.urbanetek the number 2.com. All right. So we genuinely believe that if you lean into this transition thoughtfully, develop this architect's eye, the editor's judgment, the curator's discernment, you're going to do the best work for your business and the businesses that you serve, um, not despite AI, but because of it. So um, the tools are extraordinary, but the edge has always been and will always be human. Yeah. So we'll see you next week. That's BOMAQ Talk for this week. All right.